at the idea of the state is the government structure. The state is the government structure that's involved. Bottom line on this. So when you think about it, which one came first? What does the chapter say?
Nation.
Chapter said the nation actually, does it say the nation came first?
No,
I think it said
no,
the
but I
state
think
came
we
first.
Said, I thought we said
A lot of people say that the nation comes first. And the argument or the best example that they give is the United States. Because when you think about it, the state came first, and then that nation, that culture, that people was really formed afterwards. But because before the government and the Constitution, we were Pennsylvanians or Georgians or Virginians or these kinds of things. What other questions do y'all have from the terms? Because we've covered a lot of them in here. What was the federal system? Do y'all remember that? That's actually a video. There's a video that's posted dealing with federal system and unitary system. The federal system example from the chapter was the United States. And the idea is that you're going to have multiple levels of government. And it is a video in here. I did put that one in. And it is actually Roman numeral 3, chapter 3. I believe it's chapter 4 actually, but that's the one for that, Roman numeral 3. And the unitary system basically just says a country has one government, and that's basically it. And I believe the example that the chapter gave of that was Israel. But you can get some more details from clicking that video. What else do you have?
I have some questions on the chapter questions that are on the.
Let's save those for the end, and let's make sure, because yeah, that's going to be. I want to make sure we get terms and articles today, because there's a good chunk of those. What else do you have? Anything else from 4?
Political science, we tried to define that the first day, but we never really got it clear.
Looking back on this, if you remember, politics, and it really kind of all goes together. Politics is going to be the processes and the institutions by which, when you think about it, and I'm sorry, politics is basically going to be the outputs of the system. It's going to be the results. So when you think about it, politics is basically going to be elections, it's going to be laws that get passed, it's going to be the candidates that we choose, these kinds of things. If you go back to it, politicians are going to be the people that are inside the government or affecting the government in some way. So it could be a president, could be an elected official, could be an interest group, these kinds of things, the media. When you delve into polity is talking about like-minded groups. And the article that I'd given you for polity was actually the taco stand article and then the Saudi Arabia article, if you remember. Taco stand article was the one that was talking about groups that were against some of the Spanish-speaking cultures that had moved into Georgia and some of the smaller towns. The Saudi Arabia one was basically trying to recondition the terrorists by giving them money and counseling, if you remember that. Basically, political science, to make a short story long, is going to be the study of the results. It's going to be the study of the elections. It's going to be the study of the bills. It's going to be the study of the people that we select for office. It's going to be the study of the people that are actually impacting government inside and outside, or the politicians. It's going to be the study of these groups, like-minded groups, whether they're in favor, or they're like-minded groups that are actually against something. That's what political science is going to be, is basically the sum of all of those. So with that in mind, we've now covered just about everything that's up here, with the exception of plurality and legitimacy. Plurality, what's a majority?
Over 50%.
A majority is very simply 50% plus 1. A plurality is going to be getting the most votes, but it doesn't have to be a majority. So Bill Clinton won the presidency one time with 49% of the votes. He had a plurality because he never got 50% plus 1. Plurality means that you get the most votes without getting a majority. And again, Clinton got 49% one year when he was elected. He got the most, even though he didn't get a majority of the votes. And that's what a plurality is. Any other questions?
How does that work?
If there's
Different states.
there's 3 candidates.
Yeah.
Electoral college.
Looking at the articles, we delved into assisted suicide. I'm sure you remember that. And we've talked about that one a little bit. Child labor was the Gingrich article. And maybe take a look at that one. That one might be good for a short answer, but Gingrich's idea was talking about trying to bring the work ethic back into kids, and by making them work in their schools as janitors or whatnot. And obviously there were a lot of positives to that, but there were also an equal number of negatives y'all were very divided about. Death panel we talked about. Don't let PA flunk out. That's actually talking about the Electoral College. Don't worry about that one. I'm going to go ahead and remove that article right now. Don't let PA flunk. So I'll take that one off. Doomed, do you remember what Doomed was?
Yes.
Oh, the
Subway.
Doomed was the one about the train. And do you remember what that was, the first day of class?
It was just like the idea that a person is taking a video, whether it's ethical or not,
Oh,
for
yeah.
that person, instead of taking a video to like, or picture to like, go and save them.
Yeah, go ahead.
They do with like freedom of speech and freedom of the press.
It did. It had to do with a lot of things. There was the ethical part when you think about it, about this guy trying to climb off the train tracks, and he was getting ready to get hit by the train, and ultimately he was hit and killed by the train. So this guy that worked for the newspaper snapped pictures, if you remember, instead of helping him. So there was the ethical part that you mentioned. Should you snap the pictures, or should you go and should you help him? Because in fact, you might endanger yourself and get yourself killed if you did it. Robert, you're right as well, because then there were people that complained about whether or not these pictures should have been posted. This guy is getting ready to die, and they captured this and they put it on the front page. Was it posted? Absolutely it was. And when you think about it, freedom of the press means that you should be free to post or publish these things. That guy's making probably good money off of those particular pictures, but ethically there were some problems with the posting of that and then ultimately not helping. Ghana, do you remember what we talked about with Ghana? Ghana and Iraq actually both, if I'm not mistaken, fell under this idea of legitimacy. You can be an effective ruler. And an effective ruler is somebody that goes in and changes things for the better. Somebody that improves the country when you think about it. But that doesn't necessarily make them legitimate. Do you remember what makes somebody legitimate? Go ahead, Henry.
I think it was the transfer, the legitimate transfer of power by like a democratic vote.
By lawful means. So if the law says that I'm going to get power this way, then I get power this way. So when you think about it, if I get elected, and that's what the law says, and then I go in there and I do a horrible job as a leader, doesn't matter, I'm still a legitimate leader. It's not based on what I do when I get into office, but it's based on me getting into office in a legal manner. By the same token, if somebody overthrows the government, meaning they didn't follow the law at all, and then they come in there and they do all of these wonderful things, well, they're still not legitimate, although they might have done a good job as a leader because they took power unlawfully. And Ghana, if you remember on this, and I mentioned this up here, it says, John Peter Fong, an African expert at James Madison, said the election was the first case in Africa I can think of where a country has seen two successive transfers of power from democratically elected incumbents to democratically elected successors. What I mentioned too about Africa is typically they might have one election and then it all falls apart. Or they'll have one election and then they'll have a second election and the person that was in power loses the second election, so they just ignore it and then it all falls apart. Well, in Ghana, in this particular one, they had that razor thin election. And if you go back down here and you look, it was 50.23 to 49.77. And I had asked y'all, if it's that close, a number of you said, yeah, we're going to get our attorneys, we're going to challenge this, we want recounts. And in this one, the person with 49.77 basically recognized the legitimacy of the election, stepped away, and then the challenging party took office. So it's like, in the first instance, party A won. And then a few years later, they had another election. This time, party B won. And then a few years later, they had another election, and then another party won. And what we're saying here is successive transfers of power from democratically elected incumbents to democratically elected successors. This doesn't usually happen, but that was legitimate. The Egypt article was talking about illegitimacy because they were trying to ram through that constitutional referendum. And hopefully y'all remember this, where basically the government was busing government workers in to come and vote. And it says up here, they put the turnout at no more than 5%, meaning, yeah, people voted, but it was basically a scam by the government in order to give the president more power. And the quote up here was, even monkeys in the zoo know the referendum is forged. Or in other words, basically what we're saying is this one was not legitimate. Do you remember the Iraq one? What was the story in Iraq? The Iraq vote.
Oh, to have U.S. forces withdraw?
Whether the U.S. should withdraw or not. And in fact, that was another good example of legitimacy. Did they ever have the Iraqi election? No, they never did. There was a sense that probably about 70% of the Iraqis would have wanted the United States removed, but the idea, if you remember, was who should be in control of American foreign policy? Should it be the Iraqis or should it be the president? Should it be the Americans? Should it be Washington, D.C.? And although y'all were split on this a little bit, even though if you want to create a true democracy in Iraq, you should let them vote and then the United States should leave, the United States never let them have that election because we felt like we should be in charge of what we're doing overseas. This kind of a thing. So this is basically chapter 4 now with all of the terms. Just looking back over this, do you remember Islamic retribution?
The acid in the eyes?
Yeah, that's a good one. That was the story about the guy that was in love with the woman. What happened? Anybody? Go ahead, Aljan.
He basically, she refused to marry him. He asked her a bunch of times, and then he ended up pouring acid all over her, and she was permanently disfigured. And
blinded, yes.
And blinded. And then she took him to court, and she's given the right to pour a drop of acid, or 2 drops of acid in each eye.
5 drops of acid. Yeah, it's known as Islamic retribution, and basically it's an eye for an eye justice in a very literal sense. And the idea is that if somebody commits a crime to you under Islamic retribution, then you have the right to be able to do that crime back. So this is typically a crime that women do not get relief from. But the particular woman in this case, she did win. And she did get the ability to drop 5 drops of acid in both of his eyes. Now, in fairness, it wasn't throwing a bucket on him like he did to her. And he was going to have anesthetic, I should say, so that he wasn't going to feel it immediately kind of a thing. What happened when it went to appeal?
She chickened out.
didn't do it.
What happened when it went to appeal? Yeah, go ahead.
She only can do it in one eye.
The court said that 1 man's eye, 2 women's eyes is only equal to 1 man's eye. So they upheld the earlier ruling in the sense that she could drop 5 drops, but instead of dropping it in both of his eyes, she could only drop it in 1. Did she end up doing it?
No.
She did not. She did back down on this at really the last second when she had the thing hanging over his eyes. Somebody was guiding her to do this, and she said, no, I should be thinking about a wedding. I should not be thinking about dropping acid on somebody's face. Go ahead.
Is it 5 drops in one eye, or is it just 1 drop?
It was 5 drops in 1 eye, and originally it was supposed to be 5 drops in both. And ultimately, they lowered it to 5 in 1, and then ultimately she actually did not do it. We talked about Obama's kill list. Take a look at this, because initially it was talking about the president's ability to kill people overseas, and without trials and things like this. I had given you the link where there was a debate now whether Obama could kill Americans without trial, and that's something that gets a little bit more squirrely, kind of overlaps with the drones, so maybe take a good look at that. Swearing on the Quran was very early on, and you remember the debate with that one?
Yeah.
What was the debate with swearing on the Quran? What's that?
Church and state.
What state was it?
South Carolina.
North Carolina, yes, it was North Carolina. And what is it that you do when you go to court in North Carolina?
Swear on the Bible.
Swear on the Bible. What's the law say? Anybody remember?